we're talking about the size of your lens and body cap put together. That's how much it sticks out from the body, and it weighs literally nothing. The 35mm and 24mm macros are small. The 50mm and 16mm are tiny. This 28mm, well, it's truly a pancake. Even the control ring got slimmed down in this lens design. It's so small that it left me with a big problem. And I've got two quick things to say about that right at the top. Please don't stop watching before we crank through samples and thoughts. Number one, I started falling in love with the 28mm lens when I started shooting this Sigma. This 28mm pancake from Canon is brand new, so let's call this video a first look. Two, the big problem is that I shoot with my R6 gripped 90% of the time. Wow, very chunky. And while you can enjoy the pancake form on any body, this lens in my mind is the wide angle prime for photo first shooters on the sexy forms of the RP and R8 bodies. So for this video, I'll just have to use my R6 and will rely on my imagination to convey how it would feel to use this lens on one of the smaller, more compact RP or R8 bodies. Because, well, I don't have. Two types of people are going to love this lens: those who want to be ultra portable and those who actually like the 28mm focal length. If these are the people who aspire to be ultra portable sometimes, then I fall right here. Let's hit those two groups and then we'll do gripes afterwards. If you've been on camera YouTube, you've just been getting bludgeoned by Fuji X100V and Leica Q2 and Q3 content. They're all very cool, and I guess I won't say never, but none of them are for me now or for me in the foreseeable future at all. But there is something to a smaller, simpler, yet powerful rig. And this 28mm lens finally brings that option to Canon RF shooters. If you shoot street or travel or for leisure, not wanting to bring your bigger body around with you to photograph friends and family, then you're one of the big winners with this lens announcement. And I don't think you need to hem and haw too much about whether to try it. It's literally pocketable, and you get all the same benefits of having a nifty 50, but on the wide end. And it's listed for $299 USD. It has a 55mm filter thread, has about a 9-inch minimum focus distance, and a respectable f2.8 maximum aperture. The barrel extends to focus on the close end, and it manages to still keep a manual focus control autofocus switch on the side. The front element is tiny and recessed. It's obviously not an L lens, and it doesn't have a weather sealing gasket, but because of the price, how little it extends, and how little front element is exposed, well, you can ditch the camera bag, you can ditch the ICU. If you're only bringing this lens, and this is your body lens combo, there's not a lot to break, and you can kind of toss it wherever with a little bit more confidence than if you had a much larger lens exposed from your body. Compared to the Canon 24-105 and the Sigma 28, the field of view here on the pancake with profile corrections is wider than both of them. And that would have been my guess. Canon seems to rely sort of heavily on the corrections with the more affordable lenses. Without corrections, it sort of looks like maybe a 25 or 26mm on the 24-105. There's a good amount of vignetting wide open, and you can see how that compares across the three lenses at f4. But the good news is that I think Canon is relying less on the corrections for this lens than they are for something like the 16mm. I haven't used it, but that's just based on what I've seen. In practice, the center looks great, and stop down, I'm getting just as good or better sharpness for these closer shots than the Sigma or the zoom. The main selling point of this lens is the size. You might prefer, and many people probably will, the 24 or the 35mm. Part of the deal here is that if you want to go this small, you're going to have to split the difference between those two focal lengths that are more popular. Again, with the caveat that maybe this feels more like a 26 or 27. But for true fans of the 28mm, this is a great release. Prior to launch, the only options you had to shoot this fast at 28mm were the RF15-35, the 24-70, the 28-70, or you could adapt, and obviously many other options if 28mm at f4 suits your needs. But this is many times smaller and cheaper than other 28mm options. So while I've been stingy with it lately, I'm gonna hand Canon some credit. So far, I'm pretty happy with the quality for what this lens is. I can try to peak at f8 between this lens and my zoom. We can compare at f2.8 between this lens and the Sigma, and there's just not too much to complain about. It actually looks sharper in some cases. Maybe you see some difference with the 24-70 or the 28-70. but I can't speak directly to those. You're not going to get the prettiest sun star. I had absolutely awful weather for a Milky Way try with fog and haze and smoke. I had to crank my ISO to 10,000 in dark skies to even see anything, but distortion along the edges and in the corners seems much better controlled than I anticipated, given the capabilities of the other affordable RF lenses for stars. I'll definitely need to revisit the astro capabilities of this lens when I can get some better weather. And also keep in mind that I'm shooting with the R6 and the R8, so I haven't had a chance to take a look at this and see how it performs on something like a 45 megapixel sensor. And while I also haven't personally used this 28mm on something like the R7, R10, or R50, it'll provide a great normal field of view on those bodies. Not quite the same look as a 50mm on a full frame sensor, but fairly equivalent in terms of the field of view. Now, I don't think this is a real gripe. I'm not sure that we should expect IS on a lens this small, but if you're shooting handheld video on the R8 or RP, the bodies that I think this lens makes most sense for, you won't have IBIS. You'll have to make do with handheld movement, a gimbal, or digital stabilization. And if digital IS, the frustration that you might run into with this lens is that it's not 24. 24mm is obviously wider, right? And so that allows you to punch in a little bit more when you enable those digital stabilization options. And maybe that's the fair part of this gripe, particularly if you had the 24mm EFS lens on an APS-C body in the past, and you're looking to get the equivalent field of view with this lens that you had with that one. Then you might wish this was a touch wider. The other small gripe I have on this lens is the price. I'd love to be able to see you pick this up for $249 instead of $299, like you can with the 16mm. You can get that lens for $249, and I think this 28mm lens will follow suit in time, soon after Canon has caught up to launch demand. Black Friday 2023 and beyond is probably when you might start seeing this at $249. Fingers crossed. So early verdict, if you can live with the 28mm look in your quest to go minimalist, then we've seemingly got a great value here. Check out the 35mm macro if this is too wide, and you also have the option of the 24mm macro if this is too tight.